and welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. And on today's extra special episode, we have the wonderful Kaylie Smith to talk about the wonderful, the brilliant book one of Wicked Games. Yes. And as well, for people at home who are spotting this, we also have Enchantra here, which is very, very exciting because it's not even out.
I know. It's so nice to see her in person.
And plus, they look stunning together. So, let's start off with some nice gentle questions, and then we'll get into some get into some of the ghostly ghouls of war. Where did the world kind of first come from for you? So was it a kind of world that fully kind of formed in your mind? Was it one of the kind of characters coming through first? Like, how did this all come to be?
I think so. My world and my characters usually kind of happen simultaneously, because I feel very strongly that characters are deeply influenced by the world they live in. So actually, for this book, the plot came first. I was like, oh, I really would love to do something with Dante's Inferno and sort of like a goth. I knew I wanted to write a gothic romance. I love gothic romance. And so I was like, okay, I kind of have this plot idea. And then I started like, who is the right person to tell this story? What time period are we in? Like, what, where do they live? And naturally, I'm from Louisiana, right outside of New Orleans. And I was like, oh, perfect vibe. Like, finally I can highlight all my favorite things about like my home state. So I was like, we'll set it in New Orleans. And then Ophelia, I think, is really what rounded out the world though, because I knew I wanted to do an FMC that had OCD, and I just think that lended itself to doing like a sort of psychological horror element so easily. So it was like, I knew there was no other person who could tell the story except for her, and so like all of the points kind of like end up converging together at the same time, I feel.
And I think this is why I particularly kind of love the book. And you mentioned off camera as well about Adeline Grace and stuff as well. It's something that I love about those books is the kind of the darkness that's kind of, very kind of, it kind of ebbs and flows, but it's always kind of present.
Right.
Is that something that you were kind of conscious of having in the books? And I know in your kind of previous duology, was it kind of, duology soon to be a trilogy?
Yes.
Is it kind of something that is kind of apparent there, or less so, would you say?
I would say this is definitely darker. Those are for young adults too, so it's like you kind of like taper that back, but there is a sort of like a witchy darkness there too. I think I'm just really, I was raised on like so much gothic romance, and then of course New Orleans is so haunted. There's so much like history and like magic there, and like just the entire ghost aspect. And I think I've just always been fascinated with this idea of like metaphorical monsters, like not just physical monsters, but ones we can't see. And I just think that kind of bleeds into all of my work, because I always like to get to like the root of like what the darkness, like why is it that way? Because I have like a sick, twisted fascination with it. And I think it's like people meet me in real life, they're like, you're so bubbly, like you're so different from what you write. And I'm like, well, thank God, yeah. But I think that's kind of why I have a fascination with it, because I'm just like, it's I feel like it's very not me, and so like I like to like kind of like explore creatively those spaces,
especially that kind of setting of kind of New Orleans and kind of Louisiana, because just thinking about things like the more recent kind of TV series of Interview with the Vampire and stuff, that's very kind of rich in that kind of detail. There's just something fascinating about.
Oh yeah. Oh, the originals. I know everyone, or like so many things happen in Louisiana. Yeah. And I think it was also kind of like, I think so many people, and I think it's fine for the record, but I think so many people who aren't from Louisiana like tell stories in Louisiana, and it's not even that they don't do a great job, but I really enjoyed coming in with the perspective of like having things that I've had fully growing up, so like things that other people may not like think about when they don't grow up there. So like the smell of magnolias in the spring, or like I love a live oak tree. It's my they make it into all of my books. I love because we used to climb them as kids, because their branches go like all the way to the ground, and I'm like, that's so weirdly niche, like, but it's like I get to include those little details, or like how it smells to walk like through the garden district, or like the gas lamp, and yeah, so that's really fun for me too.
Yeah, it does. When you're reading it, you do get so lost in the world, and it's very apparent that everything feels really like fleshed out, which is like,
thank you.
so good to read. So I wanted to kind of talk about next kind of the I suppose the hierarchy of the ghosts and ghouls in your world, which is again kind of so interesting, because quite often in a book maybe you'll have kind of one kind of like ghost or apparition, or you know, and you kind of, you know, read up a little bit about that and you just like, okay, I understand what a ghoul is. But then in this you kind of have a whole gamut of
yeah. I think, okay, so when I build a world, I always like to, I start off very, very expansive in my ideas, and then especially with this series, I can kind of like corner each individual like group I have to make it feel a lot richer. So it's like, you know, in this book there are devils and demons and stuff, but like we really focus on the ghosts, and in the next book we expand and expand, and I love doing that. And I think for like the ghost aspect, I sort of a little bit of influence from Dante there too, like this idea that how you act like in your living life can control the sort of power or punishment or whatever in your afterlife. So it was like, to me it feels so natural that I don't know why, but I just have this idea of the afterlife where it's like you're dead, but if you stay too long like festering in that place, like you slowly deteriorate. So then I'm like, there's a ghoul, and then phantoms are like the difference between an immortal, because we don't have immortals in our world that we know of. Yeah. We could. I'm holding out hope. But it's like I feel like it just makes sense in world building that mortal souls that die and immortal souls that die would have different levels of power in their afterlife. So I'm like, that's where phantoms could come in, and I just really enjoy doing like one being a bunch of different ways, and this kind of got to satisfy that itch in a way that made sense, because obviously Blackwell had to be a certain level of ghost compared to other ones, and then you always have that aspect of Ophelia, like, and how she reacts to the different ghosts versus people who can't. So yeah, that was really fun for me.
And obviously talking about Blackwell and Ophelia, yeah, that relationship is just so interesting, because it feels like it almost starts a little bit insta-love, but then I was thinking about it, I was just like, well, of course these people would be lonely, right? That you've kind of, mild spoilers, that you may have lost some people in your life, and you know, circumstances have kind of brought you to where you are. So yeah, where did those characters start for you, and that relationship?
So I always knew, I don't want to give too much away, but I always knew who they were very distinctly individually, and like I knew the point that they were going, and obviously the end of the book and kind of where they stand and who they are and stuff. The insta-love aspect, because I know that can be controversial, but to me here it works for a very specific reason, and that was my goal. Like, I never want to do insta love just to do it, or like just to get to the spice quicker. I like, it really felt like that is how those two people would interact upon meeting each other, and there is a loneliness aspect for both of them as well. And I just think, I don't know, I think there's a quote in Enchantra actually that I love so much, and it's sort of just like, we can hate each other in an instant, so why should love be any different? And I feel that very deeply about certain characters. I think sometimes you just know, or you just click with certain people, and we do that with friendship. So I'm always kind of like, why can't romantic love have a similar thing? But I also did really want it to be purposeful, and I think when you get to the end of the book, you realize like, yes, like everything comes together. It really makes sense for these particular characters. Like, for example, Rowan and Genevieve hate each other for a very long time. So it's not like, I kind of take the characters and like think about their overall lives and how they've like been raised and built and how they would react to each other, and it really made sense for like those two people at that time for sure. Blackwell especially, because he's like, I mean, I can imagine not knowing myself and being just so bored and lonely, and you get the one person who can like interact with you in a way that no one else has been able to, because she can interact with ghosts. So yeah.
This is why I suppose she just keeps quite literally stumbling in on like where he is, so it'd be very difficult to try and forget that.
He's like, oh, you missed me already, and she's like, I swear to God. Like,
I don't know where I am.
Yeah, this is not intentional.
And talking about obviously characters kind of that you love to read, there's also, I suppose, characters that maybe you start off kind of not liking, like Cade, for example, that you're just, oh my God. And then you're trying to kind of, I don't know, find like a reason for why they're being that way.
Cade was an interesting character. I do, because it's like sometimes I'm like, is he too cartoonishly villainous, or like people kind of have that like idea and stuff, but I always like to say Cade is fully rooted in experiences with men who I know like him, and I mean the root of that, especially growing up where I did, is misogyny, a lot of misogyny, and I think for him it was so important for me to show that like there are flickers of humanity there, right? There's flickers of empathy. He gets really upset about Lucy, that's his cousin, but he's also incredibly awful to Lucy at the same time, and I think that comes with like people who are like that. There are flickers of humanity in there, but I really kind of wanted to show like there are people who are just not good people. They're awful, and it's a very real thing people experience on a day-to-day basis, and I'm so grateful if you have not, like, if you have not had to deal with a man like that. But I always think writing villains like him is such an interesting balance to me, because there's his motivation, to me it could be justifiable, but the way they do it is just so terrible. And that final moment, sort of with him and Ophelia, like her getting deep down to his like deepest fear of like making no impact at all for anyone. I just really enjoyed that for both of their characters so much, because I'm like, he got what he deserved, but you can also, just before the lights are out, you can see like how much that affected him, and like he is a human being. So I always think it's so interesting to write those characters, you know. I hate him, for the record, but also I really didn't. I was like, I feel like he taught me a lot too, as far as villains go. And then writing like Enchantra, it was so different, because like the villain aspect of Enchantra is so entirely different, and I love doing that. I love switching things up. I'm
always kind of of the mind, either give me a character to love or give me a character to hate. But don't give me a character who's fun. So I think you did a great job.
Thank you. I agree. I think people enjoyed hating Cade. I actually think the character that drives everyone a little mad is Sinclair. Which I actually enjoy very much. Because I have people going, oh my God, Sinclair, like I love Sinclair, I want his, or like I can fix him. And then I have people going like, oh, I hate that man, and I'm like, ooh, just wait, I have plans. I love him.
So we need to touch on the wonderful kind of sister relationship in here. It's so lovely to read, because you have so much love between the two characters, but you also, I don't know, there's so much pressure, so much kind of, I suppose, expectations put on both of them, that you kind of feel the push and pull of their kind of relationship. So yeah, where did the kind of sister dynamic come from for you?
So I have a little sister. We're 13. She's 13. We're about 18 years apart, and that's a wild experience. Very different aspects of life. But I have such eldest daughter like positioning in my family, and sort of that like constant weight, or like wanting to make sure I take care of everyone, like being a perfectionist, which obviously goes a little bit, my disorder sort of makes certain things harder for me too in that aspect, but it's just like the constant anxiety of like possibly letting anyone down, and the flip side where she is so young, and like does things that I necessarily wouldn't have done that way or anything, but like being her own person. And I just feel like there's always that like really deep love, and I kind of wanted to capture the bit of like, you really don't know what your siblings are going through, and no one is raised by the same people. Like you can have the same parents, but very likely, like a lot of people, like my mother, very different mother to me than she is to my, I mean, has to be, right? She's older, she's more experienced, she's raised someone already, so it's just, I kind of wanted to play on that bit. Like Ophelia feels such a pressure to honor her family's legacy and her mom, whereas Genevieve doesn't feel that at all. And it's kind of like not having that understanding of each other, but also deeply caring about what happens to the other person. And I just really wanted to capture like that complicated sibling dynamic, but like I never wanted it to be contentious necessarily, or I didn't want like it to be very jealousy based. Genevieve was so fun to write in Enchantra because she goes on a very different emotional journey that deals with their mother, and I just loved seeing both perspectives. Like she thinks of Tessie so differently than Ophelia does, and I think my own little sister, like our sort of relationship kind of was like the groundwork for that, but she's so young, and I'm like, I feel so protective. So yeah, that's kind of, it was a little bit of an homage to that, because I mean technically I was kind of an only child, and I also think I've met a lot of eldest daughters, and they sort of feel that was sometimes a little bit that way too, because it's like it's just us taking care of everybody, and it's like I
think as well that gets so interesting, I think, as you get older as well, because you also have the thing of becoming the parent a bit more, and how that kind of, I have like an older brother, and I suppose it's you kind of become like the parents for your parents.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Because like, I mean, that's kind of like the dynamic shift, right? Like that's also why your parents getting older is so interesting, because the people who've taken care of you your whole life, like you kind of end up taking care of them, which, you know, is how it goes. And my mom's still very, very young, and stuff like that, but it's just funny to see, because like Sage will do something and I'm like, I could never got away with that when I was a teenager, like because you're not raised by the same people. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about feeling not being raised by the same people, because I think my brother got away with certain things that I probably wouldn't have.
Right, yeah, it's like everyone has different parents.
So, and also about the sisters, I suppose there's the extra element of, you know, having to inherit the family kind of dynasty almost, that you know, you're the necromancer now, it kind of all falls down to you. Do you feel like that pressure was important to kind of really explore that character, because she really does go through quite a journey?
Yeah. I think that is probably like the pinnacle of Ophelia, and like how she carries herself, like in her romantic life, in Phantasma itself, going after Genevieve in the first place, because I can tell you, I would have been like, good luck, girl.
Cheering you on.
Oh my goodness. The magic system was really fun for me, because it's clearly like she didn't have to take the magic, like she technically had a choice, and Genevieve obviously begged her not to, and Genevieve states so many times, like, if it had been her that was the eldest, she would not have continued on. And so I think that kind of also goes into Ophelia's character being like, well, thank God I'm the one who did this, because I'll be able to shoulder it. Whereas like if it had been Genevieve, you know, like she wouldn't have. So I do think as part of her personality, that's like an extra layer of complicated. But yeah, I think so many of the decisions she makes is truly like duty and loyalty. But I think that's also why so many, like, the inadvisable decision she makes with Blackwell is because she's never gotten to do that before, and she's finally put in a place where it's like, I actually might not make it out of here, and if I don't make it out of here, all that other pressure I've put on myself, all those other decisions and like burdens I've taken on don't matter anyway.
Yeah.
So why not let myself fall in love for the first time? Because otherwise, it might be. I don't think she would normally be the type of person who would just be like throw caution to the wind. But I think when you put people in life or death situations,
yes,
like perspectives fully change. So that was really fun about her character to do too, because I do so much character work before we get into the actual plot of the book. And if Phantasma hadn't been as high stakes as it was, I don't know if she would have like fallen in love with Blackwell, or the outcome might not have been the same that they had. So that was definitely a huge factor as well, like her taking on that magic and being like, well, I already did all these other things, I might as well make it out of here.
And coming on to the high stakes, because these are some high stakes. So the games themselves, and the fact that death is a real possibility for anyone kind of playing the games, or even for some of the innocent people kind of outside the games. Like where did the ideas for the games come from? Because that's when things go really like intense.
The sick twisted depths of my mind. Okay, so I studied Dante's Inferno in college. I reread it before I did this because I really wanted to make sure. I mean, I think it depends. It's like you can tell that there's like inspiration and homages there, but also I was like, let me take just some of these things and fully turn them on their head and tweak them, or like, can I think of something even more sick to add to this circle of hell? And so I kind of just wrote out like tons and tons of ideas and then pared them down, and then my editor and I like went back and forth and like this needs to be cut, this needs to be higher stakes here. We like rearranged things to like, for example, the second circle of hell isn't lust, but at that point in their relationship, I needed it to be. So it's like, we kind of took our own liberties with things, and that was really, really fun. But there were like two that were like fully formed in my head, and then the others I feel like I really had to work towards with the theme. The one that was fully formed, I think it was greed. I can never remember. Greed and gluttony are very similar concept. Just in general, not even the levels, like in general. So I'm always like, which one was this? But it was the bird cages over the pit of lava. So like obviously hell, there were so many things from Inferno I got there, but I just had this vision of Ophelia in a bird cage again, and I feel like that was kind of metaphorical to how she felt as well. So it was like, this is perfect. Also absolutely grueling. I can't even imagine having to like pull myself up. And then like the true or false level. Which is my favorite. It was my editor's favorite too. He like wrote me back after I sent him that one. He was like, you nailed this, and I was like, yes. Because that one had to do so much work, and I was like, also how sick to like I was like, I can't imagine, like everything feels good, like you don't know, it's like playing a games where you actually don't know the stakes yet, and then suddenly you learn the stakes and everything turns on its head so quickly. But yeah, some of them I was just like, lust, I didn't want to do something too obvious as like sexual lust, so it was like bloodlust naturally works, and I feel like that was also a lesson for Ophelia, so that was really fun to come up with. Or the very real stakes of you can affect people outside of the games. That level I think probably took the longest for me to come up with, because I knew that level, that's what it was, like how it affected things, but I didn't know how we got there. So when I finally came up with it, I was like, oh thank goodness. Like I was like, how do we make this work? But that one was really fun too. A lot of work. That's
my favourite, because obviously you're kind of like, I suppose, people who've decided to take part in the games, not saying that anyone necessarily deserves what could happen, but they've made a choice. But then people outside,
right. And I think that's kind of goes into like, like when you're playing these games, like, is like the sacrifices you're making for other people's lives too, is like that really worth winning? But I think there's like a certain morally gray aspect of that you don't even necessarily learn. It's kind of like, I also kind of wanted that to reflect, like, obviously Genevieve taking part in that like level, like how she existed there was really interesting for me, because I do think it was a selfish thing that she did. And I think I think that there's like layers to that. I love Genevieve's character, and I think that's a very interesting choice that she made, but I think it can be argued that it was also kind of selfish, and then she kind of shows up again, and it's sort of, is it selfish for Ophelia to continue playing as soon as you realize what those stakes are? And so I think it's like it just kind of adds like the moral grayness to every single person on page, right? Which I think is so much more interesting to play with.
Oh yeah. You don't kind of want a kind of goody two shoes kind of hero.
Like that's not fun. Yeah. Also, Ophelia's so rigid already. I'm like, girl, loosen up.
So you've already touched upon the kind of element of OCD and something that obviously Ophelia has, and with the voice in her head, like the whole kind of walking certain steps and touching the door 3 times and that type of thing. How important was that representation in the book for you?
Oh, I mean, I that's my favorite part of the book. It's also, I know some people ask me sometimes, like, if it was really tough to write that experience, but it was, like, it was so easy for me. I mean, I've lived with that my entire life. Like, it's never let up. So that was just so natural, but I felt such a hardcore drive to make sure that was a very important part of this book, because I've never read OCD representation. Especially in a fantasy romance book, and then on top of that, in the way that I specifically experience it. And so it was just really important for me to have like a layer of depth to all of my books. Like, I'm here for a spicy good time, but also if you sort of want more of that depth, like I also have that there. So I really enjoyed that balance. And when we were first selling it, I was so worried that like whoever I sold it to might try to cut that back, but I was really, my editor was like, no, let's lean into it more. And that was really nice, because I feel like at first I was very tentative with it, and then when he kind of like matched my energy, I was like, oh, like full throttle, like so I think I'm glad I got pushed, because I think I really got to like heftily put that in, and it was really important for me that it wasn't just like a quirk or a plot twist. Like truly that's just her and her brain. And I mean, it was so worth it. All the messages I get daily about it from other people who experience OCD, and it's very touching. So I'm like, if I did anything, I did that right, and I'm really proud of it. So
no, definitely. And I think as well, like people kind of want to work for their spice, in the sense that they want characters who are struggling with things like that feel real. And then obviously when you get to the good times, it has more impact.
Right.
So
I know, and I love that part of it too. Like literally, that's why I was like, it was like really cathartic and so fun in that way, because there were like those really sweet moments where she's like trying to resist, and Blackwell is like, hey, like he's very comforting, and we get to see that side of him as well, like that supportive side. And I'm like, to me that just makes the romance better. So yeah, I love that part.
Oh, definitely. It's too good. It's too good. So we're coming up to our last couple of questions, because obviously we've got an event to get to in the store. So what can you tell us? You touched a little bit on Enchantra. What can you tell us? Minor spoiler or no spoiler?
Okay, Enchantra is very different. It's so fun. I say this is very like gothic. This is very like enchanting, like Baroque sort of vibes. We have a different vibe here, which I love so much. But Genevieve is just a very different character, and as usual, we start the book where she is not doing anything that her sister has planned for her to do or listened in any capacity, and she sort of ends up at this enchanted estate, and she meets Rowan Silver, who tells her to leave expeditiously. Like, I don't want to see your face again. And she doesn't listen, and she ends up trapped in a deadly game of hide and seek with him and his 6 siblings. So, as anyone, I always refer people to watch the movie Ready or Not.
That's like one of my favorite.
Me too.
Oh my God, I love that.
Top 3 films for me. I love it so much, and so this is definitely like my homage. I love that film and my homage to it. But I was always interested after watching that film. Imagine playing this with people you don't hate, though. People you genuinely love, like actual family. And so I really wanted to kind of take that, and it gets weird and complicated, but I love it so much. Yeah. I'm
That
so
sounds
excited.
incredible. And talking of Ready or Not, I don't know if you've read, there was a book that came out last year by Delilah S. Dawson called Guillotine.
Oh.
It's very Ready or Not. It's a young woman trying to get into the fashion industry, and she meets a guy. He's a bit of an ass, but he is very well connected. So she decides to go on this kind of, week away family excursion with all of his family, and chaos.
Oh,
it's
okay.
so good.
I will be adding this to my list. No, and I'm like, anything that references Ready or Not, I'm like, yeah, I love that movie. I watch it all the time. I call it like my comfort horror film, and my partner's like, okay, like I need, like you were watching this again, and I'm like, I need you to calm down, and he's like, okay. She's just like covered in blood and running around.
You're just like, yeah, I'm feeling good about it. And for the last question, what are you currently reading? What are you watching? And if you game, what are you playing?
Okay, so reading, I mostly read books. I'm blurbing at the moment. I'm in the middle of a deadline. Always my life. Always my life. But I am reading The Haunting of William Thorne, by Ben Alderson. Absolutely cannot wait for that book to come out. And then I am also reading Moth Dark by it's a YA that's coming out. And I'm also really enjoying that one. So definitely cannot. I love blurbing books. I love when people ask me to blurb books. It's such an honor. But I don't get to like pick up a ton of books when I'm like writing a draft, because I'm like so lasered in. I am watching reruns of Buffy literally always. It's that or Howl's Moving Castle. And people are gonna be so sick of me saying that, but I'm always watching Howl's Moving Castle or reruns of Buffy, because it's so easy for me to like put it on the background and just have a go. And then I don't really game, but I am listening. I've been listening to Tate McRae's new album on repeat. So that is because I'm like, I need some ideas. So yeah, that's usually, I always have new music on. I need to get into the new Hozier album. I haven't fully, or not new. I'm sure it's very old, but people keep recommending me that, and I'm like, I should give that a listen, because everyone's like, it's so Phantasma coded. So I need to do that as well. But
you could do a playlist.
Yeah, yes. I know everyone's like, it gives me song recommendations. They're like, it's so Hozier, and I'm like, I need to just sit down with that album and listen to it for a while. But yeah, that's all the media, I think.
all the media and more.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, thank you obviously so much for joining us today, and obviously we're now off to the store for more shenanigans and geekery. But yeah, for anyone at home, if you've enjoyed what you've heard today and haven't checked out the first book, or indeed have and want to pick up the second one, we will have signed copies, hopefully of both, available to order and pre-order. So check out the links below, and we will see you next time. Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV, and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.